Hype Network presents.
On this episode of Season 4, Let's Talk.
I wasn't being the true me. So what I was extroverted and scared. I was extroverted and insecure. I was extroverted, but I was shy. So if I would to say, I was somewhat of a class clown. That's the funny thing. And I would make jokes, and I actually got voted in a school. I think we had about a couple thousand people. I got voted the most comical.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Rajiv Show, and I'm your host Rajiv Doreswamy, and this show aims to help reach out to those who are currently struggling in life and to remind you that life is indeed beautiful when you're inspired to make it your own. Before we get into this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to whichever platform you are using. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at The Rajiv Show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Rajiv Show. And we have another episode. It's another phenomenal episode. I don't know what number we are in this series in season 4, but it's nice to have a lot of guests come out and reach out and share their story on The Rajiv Show. And for me to provide the avenue, I'm grateful. So now, my guest today, of course, Rajiv Show is gonna go international again. My guest today is all the way from America, and my guest is a phenomenal conversationalist. And in this conversation, we're gonna learn a lot. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce my guest, Andrew S. Oakes. Hey, pal, how you doing?
Wonderfully well. Thanks for having me, Rajiv.
Thank you. First of all, how are things? I know I've asked this before, but yeah, how are things?
Everything's going well. I really enjoy where I'm at and in my business, and I enjoy where the community is right now, and everything, my family, everything is going pretty well. So I can't complain much.
Awesome.
And how's it going out there?
It's from my end. We're getting there. We are still trying to do things right. We're getting there. We're surviving, as the common word of the day is. So, could you give a little bit of background about yourself to my audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So this whole life of becoming a podcast guest and being in the spotlight where I have 30,000 followers online, all that is just very strange for me. The person that wouldn't even raise his hand in class, because I never really wanted to be in the spotlight, but my mission and my passion of helping people, freeing people from the grips of stress, anxiety, and depression, that's really what made me grow into doing this, because it was once my greatest fear was to do public speaking and talk out. But I had a very rough childhood, and I struggled with stress, anxiety, and depression all the way up until age 27. I was very suicidal up until age 27. And then I fixed my life. And when I was able to fix my life and put my life together, and I was just making a lot of observations about myself, and I just started journaling them. And well, I started sharing that information with other people around me, and it started to change their lives. And then I got more and more people involved, and it started to change their lives. And then some people started pushing me, say, hey, put out a video online. I said, no way, absolutely not. My hands were sweating. I didn't even want to record that first video. I put it out. I got like 1,200 views on it. And I just kept trying to put out more and more stuff, because I knew that, 1,200 views, I could help 1 or 2 families a week with this stuff in person, or I could start putting out these videos and going on these podcasts. And I think I've already been on a dozen podcasts this year, and it's so foreign, but for everything that I'm up to, it's all because my passion and purpose is helping people, and I'm willing to grow through anything to make sure that happens.
Interesting. You've opened up helping people, public speaking, and business. You mentioned business earlier. We're gonna unbox that a little bit later in this conversation. But before we travel into those Pandora's boxes, let's take this back a bit. You mentioned shyness, introverted. So you kind of covered my first question that I usually ask my guests, um, which kind of answered the question. Introverted. Uh, Usually, my question is, who are you if you and I were classmates in high school? Of course, some of our listeners already know that, and many of people have messaged me about that question. As an introverted person in class, what is the definite way of visual? If you and I were talking face to face in high school, um, are you the person behind the classroom, really introverted, shy, front, or in the library at the most? Not non-socialite kind of person. Who are you if you and I were classmates in high school? Taking this back to the
Oh,
thing.
that's a great question. That is a great perspective. Just to give grounds for some from where someone comes from, man. That's a great question. And so I'm actually extroverted,
Hmm.
and the fact that I was living almost introverted is just a telltale sign that I wasn't living in my true essence. I wasn't being the true me. So
Hmm.
what I was extroverted and scared. I was extroverted and insecure. I was extroverted, but I was shy. So I if I would to say I was somewhat of a class clown. That's the funny thing.
Hmm.
And I would make jokes, and I actually got voted in a school. I think we had about a couple thousand people. I got voted the most comical. So I was a jokester. I was always joking around. I hung out with everyone,
Hmm.
every class of people. In fact, my lunches, if I ever got a lunch, most of my lunches I spent in behavior improvement room,
Hmm.
which I was always because I would get in trouble for different things. But I would, if I got a lunch, I would spend it at multiple different tables. Like I would hang out with the popular kids, I would hang out with the unpopular kids. I just had many different friends, and I would just float along and make a couple of jokes at this table, make a couple of jokes at that table.
Hmm.
And the reason why I was often in trouble is because I was very misguided. But I worked a lot in school. I
Hmm.
had 2 or 3 jobs at a time, from all the way from 8th grade up until to now. I mean, it's just who I am. It's in my blood. I've been working pretty much ever since I was 8 years old. Me and my brother would mow grass um, around the neighborhood and make money. I would buy candy, and then I would take it to school and sell it. So I've always kind of been working and trying to get ahead in life.
Hmm.
But I I would be a good friend. I would have been, me and you would have conversations on, it would either be one of two things. If
Hmm.
we and you were connected as real friends, we
Hmm.
would have very deep conversations about philosophy, about life itself. It wouldn't be trivial with me. A fun fact about me is, in America here, a lot
Hmm.
of people like the modern Marvel comics, and they like a lot of fiction.
Yeah.
I can't watch fiction. I never watched a single modern Marvel. I don't watch any fiction. Even growing up as a child, I didn't watch any fiction. I would watch How's It Made, or I would watch learning, educational shows, National Geographic, things like that. So it always had to be educational or informational with me. So when it comes to true deep friendships,
Hmm.
my conversations would have been on deep level, philosophy level, on education, informational level. But when it came to me, say, crowd surfing at lunchtime,
Hmm.
who would be the guy that showed up would be, if I showed up at your table and we were kind of friends like that, I would crack a couple of jokes, I would be real funny, and then I would move along to the next table.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I love it. I love it. I mean, somehow the way I understand it, your definition of I don't know what the umbrella word of introvertedness and extrovertedness is. It's more like you're somewhere in the middle. It's an ambivert kind of vibe or something. Uh, the way I see it.
Chameleon.
Yeah, yeah, something like, yeah. Chameleon is another word of it, but yeah, ambivertedness as I think the word. Often I interject certain words like, "Are you even inverted?" at some point. But yeah, uh, but that's really fascinating. I mean, I didn't really expect that right off the bat. Extroverted. As it's really fascinating. You opened up the conversation to philosophy, and I think in my experience of having a good conversation, a solid good conversation, philosophy is history. I mean, for me personally, I'm a history buff. I love history, um, and anything to do with history. It doesn't matter if it has fiction involved into it. Somehow pushes the story. I mean, the narrative of history is really fascinating, and I gotta ask. Speaking of history, uh, what is your favorite subject in high school, if I may ask?
I would say that's a tough one. I think my easiest subject would have been mathematics.
Hmm.
My hardest subject would have been English. Um, I actually didn't learn how to read very well until I was 27 years old.
Hmm.
So I struggle with reading and writing all the way up. But here's the crazy part:
Hmm.
is if I always had money. Remember, I had pocket money, so I would ask people to help me with my papers, and I would ask people to help me with reading assignments, and my grandmother would get the movies to any of the books that I had to read. So that way I could watch the movie, so just to be able to get through school. But I managed to make it through school, limping, barely made it through. But
Hmm.
my favorite subject would have been something, I would say history sometimes,
Hmm.
but more probably I would say science, or something that you're learning more hands-on, more exciting to be present, because reading it from a book was very brutal for me. So, but I like history, and
Hmm.
I like hearing stories, or like the men that built America. There's a series
Hmm.
that is really worth seeing. If But it talks about how intellectual these people are. It talks about the inner workings of their mind and thinking and their interactions with other human beings. See, that gets my attention, and it gets all my attention. It's my heart, my brain, everything's in line, and I could feed on that. So I would say in school, though, it would have to be something science based, because it was hands on, and that was solely because it was hands on and it was a fun activity.
Interesting, interesting. Now I could relate to you in such a way. I mean, I do agree that maths is not really the best in my vocabulary in high school. Although yes, I'm a half Indian, it just doesn't ring well with me. It's very funny. I don't know how many times I've said it, but it's really ironic. An Indian like me cannot really count. That's really a thing. English for me, English. A short story that I would love to share is um, I'm brought up in a cinephile situation surrounding, you know, if I may share a little bit of story with my experience on how I managed to improve English, my English, and how I learned how to speak. If I may say so, majority of the ways that I've learned how to speak and uh, present myself was watching uh, back back when I was young. I remember every Sundays, right after church, we come off after church around 12 o'clock. We have a nice lunch. Everybody has a nice lunch, and then of course there's an on Sundays everybody takes a load off and just relaxes, and I'm there at the TV in front of the TV, and I think around 5 p.m. or something they have this thing called Please Believe It or Not, where they talk about these things, these unbelievable acts by people who've done things that are unbelievable. I'm sure you've seen these stuff, and that's when my fascination for movies and intellectual stuff, m- how I learned how to improve my English came from that, and then moving forward into majority of the chunk of movies and TV shows that helped me um, push out my confidence. is that I've been watching a lot of American movies about um, the one that's resonating much with me, and I think I've mentioned this I don't know if I mentioned this in a couple of podcast collaborations, is that my favorite of all is The Godfather, the one and two and three, of course, where I had to watch that 5 times. It was the only movie I think in my recollection that I had to watch it more and more in order to understand how people think and how people, although yes, I do understand you're not a fiction person, but yeah, the way the structure of the storytelling and the narrative, and I'm sure. Any thoughts on Godfather? Have you seen the movie, by the way?
So that's one of the most popular American films, and I've never seen it. That's the
Yeah.
funny thing, because half the films that all Americans have ever seen, I haven't seen them.
But I mean, if you have spare time, it's a nice film. I mean, it resonates with the way of thinking and stuff like that. I mean, uh, for me personally, I really enjoy it. And in terms of inspiration and motivation, I'm gonna transition from movies to to TV shows, and of course, this was trending last year, the pandemic 2020. It was, of course, The Last Dance, but the documentary of Michael Jordan. I'm sure you've never seen this, but it's also another thing on the list.
No,
If
I
you
haven't.
if you if you have a list right down there, you got to check out Godfather trilogy and Last Dance. I think The Last Dance is a 10-part season where uh, there's a documentation of Michael Jordan and his fire and his obsession of winning 6 championships, and what drove him to be the best in the basketball world. And the latest ones that I've also seen in terms of inspiration, motivation, is also the biography of Tiger Woods. Um, this I, this is also this was recommended by Valuetainment, Sir Patrick Bet David, and um, all of these stuff, all of this stuff coming to it, the inspiration, the motivation, the confidence. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention confidence. My confidence came from watching improv shows. Um, One thing I envy Americans is that they have so many platforms for many types of shows and types of experimental stuff that some certain countries don't really get much exposure of. And I'm a big fan of
Yeah,
improv. I heard improv is one of the greatest forms of self it's part of that hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy, self actualization or self realization, and being present in the moment and coming up with certain weird characters, weird ideas on the spot. And my favorite of all improv is the show Whose Line Is It Anyway, which of course is
yeah,
another recommendation. I'm sure you've seen it. I hope you've seen it. uh,
yep. That's one I used to watch.
yeah,
That's actually a show I used to watch when I watched TV.
yeah. Whose Line Is It Anyway? My favorite Wayne Brady of all times. I mean, that's where I got the confidence of um, expressing my thoughts, expressing my feelings, the things that I want, and I love it. I mean, those are the things that I want to share, and to connect that off with public speaking, because that was one of the boxes, one of the Pandora's boxes that we gotta open. Now, from my standpoint of learning confidence, building confidence, I gotta ask you, what was the transitional point from you going from you mentioned extroverted yet introverted character or personality, transitioning to the shy type and entering into public speaking? What was the transitional? Do you have a story there that may inspire us?
Yeah, so I started helping people. Let's take a look back at growing up, where the shyness come from. My
Hmm.
mom was very vocal and embarrassed me in public a lot.
Hmm.
Um, uh, it was very hard for me emotionally as a kid, but I also, so that's one setup from where that came from. But if you look at my dad, on the other hand, And you look at my interactions with my dad, we would go out in public and we would get in trouble for being loud. Yet my mom was very loud. It was very peculiar. But my dad would often say that there's two types of people in the world. There's one that comes to be the show, and then there's one that comes to see the show. And my dad made it very clear that we're the come to see the show type of people. So that was always ingrained in me, and I was always, my self-esteem was very low. My mom used to call me homophobic slurs when I was a young boy. She was very abusive, and I was maybe 5 years old, and I liked jazz music, and I liked this group called Boys to Men, and I liked this lady named Whitney Houston and this lady named Mariah Carey, and they had these love ballads, and I just liked the saxophone, Michael Bolton, Kenny G, and it just was wonderful music to me. And my mom, music lit me up ever since I was a baby. And my mom just did not like, I guess, my preferences. And she just really teed off on me with the homophobic slurs. So I always felt like I was not good enough. And I always felt like I was broken. I wasn't right, because I liked flowers. I like beautiful tree. Like, if you see a cherry blossom tree that's this beautiful pink, and it's like, my heart says, oh my God, that's beautiful. And my mom just kind of like beat that out of me, and she didn't want that in me. And I grew up to be this really, really tough guy, where I worked. My career is one of the hardest in America, the most death rates in America, which is the railroad. I had a farm. I was raising my own my own animals and butchering them myself, goats and sheep and chickens and ducks and turkeys and pigs. And I'm wrangling these 200-300 pound critters, and I'm putting them in the freezer. I'm butchering them myself. I'm cooking them myself. And I was an alligator hunter. I was an avid hunter. And I was hunting. I don't know if you're familiar with an American alligator, but they're very large animals. The biggest alligator we ever got was 12 foot, 545 pounds. So about 3 times larger than an average male weight. It's very, very heavy. And we put it in a 14-foot John boat. So almost as long as the little boat that we were in. But that's who I was. I had morphed into that character of like being this tough guy, because it's so wrong for me to be sensitive. I thought it was so wrong for me to like these flowers, and I had to be tough and do all the things that all these men were doing. And that wasn't the case. And I ended up in a very skewed place, but I always felt insecure. And the reason why I felt insecure is just because I was never truly being who I was. If I would have just really stepped into my essence and reclaimed my life earlier, it wouldn't have took me until 27 to find who I am. And now if you look, I have tattoos of flowers on my arms. I don't mind if somebody judges me now. I don't mind the music that I listen to. I don't kill animals, and I rarely ever eat meat now. Rarely ever eat meat. So I've made a complete transition. In fact, I'm so against killing things, like just for myself. I don't care what anybody else does. That's none of my business. I'm not judging anybody for killing a spider or killing a bug, but I'll catch the spider in the jar and I'll transport it outside. So that's the night and day difference between my old life and my new life. However, that struggle from being, open with everybody, to be vulnerable, it's almost exposing yourself to the greatest amount of pain that you can ever feel. Because truly, the most pain that I've ever felt in my life, even though I've broken bones, I've broken my neck. I've literally broken my neck. I got 2 titanium plates and a ball bearing in the spine of my neck. Okay, so I know physical pain, but that doesn't get anywhere close to the emotional pain that I felt from human beings. So when you open yourself up to public speaking, it is like opening yourself up to be hurt in the worst of ways. So it's a terrifying thing. For me, it was terrifying, because here I am, finally stepping into my true self and becoming me. Now I'm going to let the world judge me. Now, how would I get through so much fear? Why would I push through so much fear? is because I identified my purpose. I identified my passion. And I know that my fear is there. I know my hates are there. Did you know I hate technology? I
Hmm.
hated technology. And I didn't know much about computers at all, or even a cell phone, until 3 years ago. But
Hmm.
now I built my own website because I'm learning all this stuff. I'm pushing through my fears. I'm pushing through my hates, all because my passion and purpose is to help people. And when you start helping these people, affirmations start to come in. I had this guy call me, and he's a big guy. I mean, a very, very large human being. He probably was about, I don't know, 6'8", 6'9", and he probably weighs about 350 pounds. And I had helped him with some things in teaching him a few things about finance and about philosophy. And he calls me on the phone, and I hear it in his voice, and he starts to choke up, and he's like, and he's trying to get his words out, and he's starting to cry. And he says, Andrew, I want to tell you thank you, because for the first time I have hope.
Hmm.
That right there was one of those affirmations where it's like, okay, well, you have an opportunity to help more people. Are you going to be a coward and stand in the shadows? Or are you going to allow yourself to be vulnerable and get hurt so you can help those people? And I said, you know what? I got to make these videos. I got to put them out. And that's what I've been doing. And stepping on this stage this year, it was very hard. My hands were shaking.
Hmm.
My legs were sweating. I mean, it was hard. But to me, even though it's still difficult leading up to it. And you would think you would just start becoming accustomed to it, but it's so unnatural for me. It wasn't who I was. And it was, I'm trying to be obedient to my passion and purpose, which is to make sure that I'm helping people, that I'm putting my true energies and my true effort. And if I don't step into it with courage, will I ever step into it? Or will I ever fulfill my destiny here if I don't?
I mean, I feel like you've transported me to your canteen in your school. This is how I feel right now, pal. Um, I felt like I've been transported to the canteen in your high school. I mean, the way I envision it is with the locker rooms and the canteen lady serving us, you know, favorites of the day or favorites of the weekend. You and I are having. I feel like that right now. I mean, I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
These are the things that I live for. Conversations like this, which is a dime a dozen from where I stay, in my opinion, of course. Not to offend those who are listening, thing. And I love it. I mean, I want to move forward into the conversation about the thing you mentioned. You had a business, which is the last of our Pandora's box to be open. But before that, folks, we're gonna come back, and we will be right back after this short break.
If you want to learn something new or useless about the world around you, why don't you try listening to the Banyu Podcast Reflushed on Spotify, Anchor, or any podcast app that you use?
Hey, folks, welcome back to our episode here. And my guest, of course, Andrew Oakes. I hope I pronounced your name right, pal, by the way, in the introduction. And I just realized, I hope I nailed it. I nailed it into the T. So earlier on, the first half of our conversation, we were talking about, of course, and my guest's. I was trying to go with your first name, but my guest's experience in high school, his life, and the turning point of public speaking, and of course, a lot of stuff, maths and history and many a stuff, and it's pretty interesting. We to wrap the first conversation, we ended it with a very powerful philosophical conversation, which is amazing, and uh, I really am grateful for that. I want to talk about business. Business, of course. Um, I want to transition this in this the narrative of the storytelling in our conversation is that we've opened this up from high school all the way to public speaking, which you mentioned in the first half of this conversation, and then you've also connected that to helping people. I gotta ask though, uh, when does business become a part of passion in terms of connecting with people, in terms of helping people? Where's that line? Where do you draw the line in terms of how you deal with business, if I may ask?
So that's still a tough one that I'm learning now. Let me tell you how I actually got into like figuring out that this could be a business. So I've done many. I've always been a career man. I've always worked many jobs, but I've also had side hustles where I would mow grass or pressure wash houses, different things like that, or buy cars and clean them up and fix them up and then sell them. That we call that flipping.
Hmm.
So I've always been in that kind of stuff. But what happened with the business that I have now, which is Stress Relief Headquarters, is I didn't realize that coaching was an actual career. I was just helping the friends. Like I told you, I was helping the friends around me, and I was helping a lot of them with finances because I read a financial book and it taught me about finances. In America here, they didn't teach us about finances in school. So a lot of us, we have a lack of financial education. So what happened is I was helping these people, and one of the people that I was helping, one of the guys that I was helping from work, he ended up telling two other guys that the stuff that I was teaching didn't work. And it really made me mad inside because I helped him sit down and write out a budget for his finances, and he realized that he had a little extra money. And I told him to cut up his credit card. So no, debt is bad. So paying somebody interest is a very dangerous and bad thing according to this book. And I was never taught that up until reading that book. Anyhow, the guy went and bought a new boat, and that boat was a very, very nice and very expensive boat. And he was basically saying that I almost got his water turned off because he couldn't pay his water bill on a credit card, because I did tell him to cut up the credit card. I hope you know what credit cards are.
Yeah.
So I told him to cut up the credit card. And I told him because he couldn't control it. He was going out to lunch and buying like two other people that he worked with lunch when him and his wife were on a budget. They weren't supposed to be spending money, but he's spending money on a credit card. He's buying gas on a credit card. Like, hey man, you don't have enough self-control. You can't possess it. So I did tell him to cut it up, and he was citing that cut up credit card as the reason why he almost couldn't pay his water bill. And a water bill is pretty low, maybe like $50, which is low in America. So the average rate of pay would probably be about $25 an hour. So about 2 hours worth of pay is what a monthly water bill would be.
Okay.
So you think about that, and he's saying that his water bill his own water almost got turned off because he couldn't pay the bill because of the credit card. And he told two other guys that I also had helped, that the stuff that I'm teaching doesn't work. Well, it made me mad because I didn't tell that guy to go buy that new boat.
Okay.
He's seen extra money and he went and bought a new boat, and he bought it with debt. So he has a big old boat payment, maybe like $700 a month or so. I don't know what it was because he never told me. I don't speak to the guy. But I was so bitter that I spent all that time helping him and his wife. And he not only lashed out against me, he lashed out against me to two other coworkers that also was doing the same plan. They were optimistic, they were happy, they were excited, they were in progress. And then now here's somebody saying that it doesn't work. So it's like all that time I worked with all three of these individuals is up in the air. It's almost going to erode away. And I was really hurting inside. And I went to Google and how can I help my friends better? That's how I was going to get over this. I said, I can't change them, but I can change myself. So I typed in, what can I do better? And there was this thing called John Maxwell coaching. And it said that, help your friends, influence your friends, and all this other stuff. And I was like, you know what? This is exactly what I need. So I signed up for it, and I paid a lot of money for this. And I had no desire. And I'm shocked that I even spent that kind of money, because that's not in my nature. I'm a very frugal person. I'm very cheap in nature. I wouldn't spend that kind of money. But my passion and my purpose was to help people. So I said, Andrew, do you care about them or not? That was the question I posed to myself. And I said, I do. All right, so go. So I signed up for this training. I started doing the training, and I go down there, and it's for the certification, it's 3 days, and it's a couple states away from me. So I go down there, and I'm staying in a hotel room, and I'm watching the seminar, and this is when it finally clicks that, holy smokes, this is a business. I could actually do this as a business. I can help even more people, because if I didn't have to spend 60 hours, 40 to 50, 60 hours a week working at another job, eventually I'll be able to help people full time. I can spend 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week helping people if I could get paid for this. And that's when I started to make that transition. Like, okay, I want to start helping people. And then, but you'll see a lot of the work that I still do today is free. I want to make sure that I'm helping free. But I also get executive clients. I get people that call me, the most random people, like I don't even know how they get my number sometimes. But they say, hey, you coach so-and-so, or they're like, hey, I heard that you're a good coach for stress management, for financial, whatever it is. And they will call me. So in the beginning, when I started doing coaching, it was financial, because that was the book that I learned. But eventually I learned that financial is just one part of the stress that everybody handles or everybody deals with. So I learned many different parts. And also remember, I had stress, anxiety, and depression all the way up until age 27. So I went back to my notes and I was like, finances is only part of the stress. Why don't I teach people how to tackle their stress in a whole? Why don't I help people why don't I help free people from stress and anxiety and depression? So that's when I started to switch that angle. And I still teach some finance when I'm dealing with a client, but that's only if that client needs it. So we have multiple different quadrants of our life that are causing us to be happy or sad. So you might have, say, people look at financial and they blame all their stress on financial, or maybe they blame all their stress on work, or maybe they blame all their stress on their spouse or their household. But we have many different other places that we can be happy or stressed out in. Well, like, what's your vacation look like? Are you taking time to vacation? Are you taking time to travel, to leisure, to go to parks and spend time with nature? So that's another area of life. But there's multiple different areas of life that we look at and develop and diagnose where the discomforts are. And then once you can start removing those discomforts, that's when stress goes away and relief and also happiness return.
Interesting. It's really, really interesting way of seeing it. My way of understanding this is in the terms of business. For me, before I continue this conversation, I would love to hear the recommendation of the books that you mentioned. Maxwell. I think I've heard of Maxwell. It's just that I didn't have the opportunity. Could you recommend? We're gonna put the books, the show notes on the books down here, on the show notes here in our description. Could you recommend some of the books that you've mentioned you read as a form of recommendation to, of course, our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the greatest books for finance, one of the greatest books, the very first book I ever read in my life at age 27. Remember, I struggled with reading, but the very first book I read in my entire life was The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey.
Okay.
It's a very, very good book. It talks about avoiding debt. It talks about the basics. Another one that would be on the financial realm that I read very close to that was called The Richest Man in Babylon. This one would be probably better suited for your audience out there in the Philippines, because it doesn't have as much of the American financial system written in it. But it gives you the basics, the philosophy basics. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's by George Clason. Fantastic book. And then there's another one. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, this one's not only about money. This one is talking about rich in all the quadrants of your life, because you can be rich in many different places. It doesn't take money to be rich, because you might have the richest friendships in the world, You might have the richest ideology or thoughts in the world. You might have the nicest park right there by your home, and you don't need much. You might have the best philosophy. You might have, there's so many different riches. You might be able to experience happiness greater than anybody else just because it's who you are, it's who you're in line with. But there's so many different riches other than financial. But this book talks about how to acquire those riches. So another riches is written in that book is the ability to trust other human beings. So nobody would think about that as being rich. That's a wonderful rich. Is just to be able to trust people, to have people that you can trust in your life. That's amazing. That's fantastic. So it talks about how to acquire success and to become rich by the process of your thinking. So that's another one. But if they want a full list of the books, they can go to my website, stressreliefhq.com, and my favorite books are on there. I have many different ones. The Happiness Advantage is another good one by Shawn, I think.
Interesting. Coming back to the conversation earlier before thing. I have this one curious question in terms of the business, because I've noticed that there's a pattern of thought in how you did things. Of course, you mentioned earlier, of course, that you've worked on almost a large chunk of majority of the odd jobs when you were in high school as well. You mentioned that in the earlier conversation, I remember. And then moving forward with all those experiences with the alligators and the car wash and all this whatnots that you've added into your repertoire. I gotta ask though, when you found out that thing, because I have this one question. The reason why I'm saying these words is that as a starter pack for people who are wanting to dive into a certain form of their passion, what are your thoughts on niches and starting this, starting that? Because the way I've seen it is you went from general to specific. The way I've analyzed the entire conversation is that you've done almost everything on earth, and then you went into financial, and then you went to alligator hunting. It's all part of the whole journey. I'm compiling it, and then as you went down to the niche, when you went into finance, that's when you started getting people, and you were helping them out, and then you started slowly widening that niche into personal self-improvement and whatnot. I gotta ask though, from your perspective, what are your thoughts for people when it comes to niching it, or going learn everything and then dial it down? What is your thoughts on this? What is the point of attack best suited for an individual who is listening to us right now?
Rajiv, that is a wonderful question. That is a fantastic question. So I would say that I'm a little bit biased. So I was told by many coaches all the way from the very beginning. It was funny because I had other coaches calling me, Rajiv. I had coaches, like high-level coaches that are making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. They're already doing public speaking. They're calling me. The low guy on the totem pole, the new guy to the field, and people are calling me to coach them. Because my philosophy is very sound, it's very strong, and more people that called me, that I was more and more shocked. But a lot of the advice that I was given was that I needed to find a niche, and it was just a struggle for me to find a niche. I didn't want to be stuck in a box, and it's not who I am. And I wanted to continue to just help people, and that's what I did, is I helped people. But as I grew and I did learn to somewhat tailor my message. But my idea the whole time was, those coaches that are out there, and maybe there's an artist in the field, some fields that they make a good living. They have a small, I compare it to having a small garden plot outside your yard, just outside your house there. Maybe you have this, 100-meter garden, and you're planting in that 100-meter garden. Well, that's kind of like niching down, right? So if you niche down even further, maybe you only have a 10-meter garden. And sure, you can make a life out of it. You can make a living out of it. But see, that's about making a living. I could go ahead and make a whole bunch of money and niche down, but that wasn't who I was. That's not what I was about. And I've helped thousands of, maybe even 10,000. I have 30,000 followers online, but in person, kind of like direct contact, I don't know, thousands of people I've helped, and over the last 7 years. And I never charged most of those people. 999% of them, 99.9% of them, I've never charged a dime. And it's because I care about people. So my goal was to always be helping these people. So everybody with the idea that you need to niche down to make finance, that's fine. To make an income, that's fine. That's fine for them. But I felt like my passion and my purpose was much bigger. So what I related to is, I'm not planting a garden, I'm planting a forest. I'm planting a forest that's going to go nationwide. I'm going to plant a forest that's going to be across the globe, because there's people in, say, the Philippines. They're stressed out. They're hurting. They need help. They need information. They need guidance. They need love. They need support. So I want to be that guy that plants a forest. I don't want to plant I want to reach out and make sure that I'm making a difference in the world over niching down. However, it does look like I niche down, but my subject just so happens to touch every single human being on the planet, which I knew all along. My goal was to help every single individual. Now, what would be the advice that I would give somebody else that had a specific thing? If niching is in line with your passion, it is in line with your goals, there's nothing wrong with it. That is probably the quickest way for an income, but also thinking outside of the box inside of your niche. So to be able to add your own style to it, so it fulfills you, so it makes it feel good when you do it, because you want a business that energizes you. You don't want to do something you're good at because it's in your niche, or you don't want to niche down into something you're good at, because I'm really good at financial coaching. But let me tell you, financial coaching is very difficult because I'm an emotional guy. I love people. And whenever I have somebody, I helped a couple. Let me give you an example. A reason why I cannot be a financial coach, even though I'm really good at it. I had a couple I was working with, and the guy was totally on board. The woman was saying she was on board. She started to get on board, but then she got angry at the husband. When she got angry at the husband, she went out and bought like $2,000 worth of clothes, like a $1,200 pair of boots, like purses, all kind of stuff on a credit card. Well, when she did that to him, it hurt me, because like, oh my God, why would somebody do that? They had a promise to each other, and it just kind of like broke my heart, right? So I know that I don't have the emotional intelligence to do that job. So I'm really good at it, but that job was very draining for me. So laying in bed that night after getting that phone call with him, very upset and feeling abused by his wife, I felt that pain for him. And I'm like laying in my bed, and I'm like, okay, I can't do this like that, because it's eroding at my own life. So if a niche or something you're good at is in that niche, but it doesn't make you feel good, I wouldn't do it. However, if it does make you feel good, and you just spent 12, 16 hours doing what it is that you love, and it is in your niche, go for it. Pursue it with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and know that it's right. But if you don't feel right niching, then maybe you're not supposed to niche. Maybe you're supposed to continue your education and help while you can. So just help the people that are around and continuously pursue your dream, pursue your target, your goals. Have it identified. Know what it looks like. What are you driving in your dream? What would you have to learn to become the person who owns the house in your dream? What would you have to learn to be able to handle finances the way that the person in your dream life would have to, the you that would be in your dream life, how would you have to learn to manage relationships? If you have anything that you have to learn to get you closer to the dream, go grab that material and go back and start reading it. And then whenever you're hearing, this is a good thing about knowing your dream in the greatest detail. So if you know your dream in the greatest detail, whenever you hear advice, you can automatically tell if it's good advice or bad advice. So if I'm telling you something about life or philosophy, what you do is you go back and look at your dream and you ask yourself, does this get me closer to my dream? And if it does get you closer to your dream, then it's good advice for you. And if it does not get you closer to your dream, then it's bad advice from you. And then the other part about accepting advice is you just ask yourself, does it pass your moral code? Does it pass your moral code? And if you question your moral code, think about this. My moral code asks this question, or well, my life desire would be this: to go through my life without ever creating a victim that includes self. So never create a victim that includes yourself. So try to avoid hurting anybody. So if it doesn't hurt anybody, it passes your moral codes and it gets you closer to your dreams, that's good advice. So if you're going to niche down, ask yourself, is that part of your dream? Is that the dream that you've identified? If you're not ready to niche down and you're not trying to go into something that you hate, or you haven't quite found what you love that energizes you yet, continue to take on new experiences that get you closer to your dream. If you haven't fully identified the dream, try new stuff. You say, maybe I would like welding. Maybe I would like sewing. Go take a sewing class. Go take a welding class. Go take a woodworking class. Go take a knitting class. Go take a pottery class. Go take an art class. There's maybe a musical class. There's different things that you can do, but make sure they're heading toward your dream, or they're in the name of finding out, in the name of identifying what the dream is. So that would be my advice on niches.
That is powerful. Of course, I want to share my thoughts on how I heard it, because the reason why I'm asking that question, and I've always been wanting to ask that question, is it's for me in my head, it's very hard coming from my perspective. I want to share my story as well here. Is that of course my knowledge of um doing things that I do now with the podcasting is that my direction in life has changed. I've taken a drastic turn from arts and music. Of course, I made a deal with myself the moment I hit the graduation pole, even though I didn't attend my graduation, was that once I was done with music, we graduated from music, I didn't really want to touch it. But my main intention there was really that. And, I never really touched music. I do listen to music on the back end, but my main goal now is to somehow figure out where I can niche down certain things. It's very hard because there's so many opinions here, and especially when you Google things nowadays, which is you've mentioned, it's a thing. It's a trend of how to ask for a better life. Is mostly you just Google it. Is that is that the obvious answer and the most generic answer that people will give you, especially Google will give you, is to niche it down, and it's very hard. Is for me, it takes me days to just figure out the things that I want, and it's very hard. So when I started this podcasting journey, and I never even expected I'd have guests on my show, and take the show to the levels that I've never achieved, and of course crossing the threshold of 50 plus episodes is far beyond my belief. And and yeah, I mean, it's a journey. The way I describe how I heard this conversation is that this journey has a red dot in the middle. All you have to do is run towards it as it becomes bigger and becomes clearer. So the more you clear the fog in order to head to where you want to go, you just need to keep going. If you can't find that laser that's pointing towards your direction, you have to make your own laser. That's how I see it. According to, I hope I got the transcription right from my perspective of understanding you and how you've said your piece.
Yeah, I like the idea about the laser to have the target, but one thing that people are searching for is the vehicle that's going to get them to the dream,
Mm,
right? So they're searching for the vehicle, but you got to identify the dream before the vehicle will present itself
mm,
to you.
true,
But
true.
you also got to go looking. You cannot sit idle on your hands. You have to continuously. Yes, I know most people work 40, 60 hours a week and they have a job,
Mm,
but what we have to do is find that extra time to be growing ourselves into what our, sometimes we're in a growing season, right? The
yeah.
reason why our dream hasn't grown up or showed up, or our opportunity hasn't showed up yet, is
Mm,
because we still need to grow. So you don't go into the gym the very first week and start lifting 225 pounds.
yeah.
You gotta, or I don't know how many kilograms that would be. I think y'all use metric system there.
We use
And
pounds.
then so okay, you do use pounds. That's fantastic. It makes my life easy. So you you don't go in there and lift 250 pounds and then you're ready to go play professional football, right?
Mm,
You
yeah.
take, it takes time. You go to the gym and then eventually you get the tryouts for the football team.
Mm,
So eventually your opportunity is going to come, but you got to remember you're in the weight room. You
yeah.
know, the weight room is WAIT, but also the weight room where you're lifting weights. You got to make sure that you're lifting weights behind the scenes. And I'm talking about mental weights, right? You know, lifting
Mm,
these books up, lifting these ideas and learning more about what interests you, and
mm,
try it out, play around with it, have fun with it. If it's not fun, if it's not bringing you energy, remember to just let it go. And even if you spent a lot of time on it and you're like, oh, well, I have to do this because I've spent so much time on it. If it's not bringing you happiness and joy, maybe it's not for you, and it's okay to start over. Look
mm.
yourself in the mirror and say, it's okay. It's okay. And I re-identify the dream and start to search for the new vehicle that's going to get you closer to it.
Powerful, powerful. I love this conversation. I mean, this is one of the loveliest conversations where I get to sit down and just unwind. Basically, the recording, folks, for those who are tuning in, the recording of this conversation is right around 10 p.m., 10:30 around my time, and we were just unwinding from a crazy week. From my side, of course. And this is what a way to end the week off. And this is a Friday, guys. You know, TGIF, all the stuff. And I'm glad to have actually caught this conversation with you because this is more um, this is more, sorry for putting food metaphors, because food is the only thing that I could make this conversation more interesting, more spicy, you know, as I is that this conversation is like an American grilled steak, an American high class grilled steak, you know, with the finest wood that was kept in, and then the grilled steak. I know it my mind is thinking about the American steak with the T-bone and all these good stuff, you know. So that's how this
That's
conversation
fun.
is for me, and these things are like pieces of gold for me. So I really I admire the conversation. I hopefully I get to have more conversations like this with you off camera, and you know, get to have another conversation with you somehow in the upcoming season, or I hope so. So, of course, we've uncovered a lot in this conversation. I mean, it has been interesting beyond measures. Of course, my listeners would love to connect with you, pal. How would they find you on social media, pal? If my folks want to find you on, you know, on anywhere on the internet.
Okay. So most of my branding is now Stress Relief Headquarters. Stress Relief HQ would be my website. Stress Relief HQ also is my Facebook group. And then you can find me on my personal page. I still have some room there on Facebook, which is Andrew S. Oaks. And then it would be the same for LinkedIn if you want to link up with me on LinkedIn. And then when you do link up with me, feel free to ask questions. If you have stress in your life or you have issues, remember, I like to help people. So this helps me get my message out there. This helps me really fulfill my destiny is to be able to help people. So if you do have a question, you're wondering, hey, can I ask this guy this question? Is he going to charge me or something like that? Don't worry about that. I'm not looking to earn income as much as I am to earn a better world. I want to make the world better. So you're not bothering me or bugging me by asking a question. So if you do end up with a question, feel free to ask it even on Facebook Messenger or something like that. And I'll get to it at some point. I won't promise it'll be right away because we're getting a little busy these days, but I'll get to it and I'll make sure that I answer your questions to the best of my abilities. And I'm also on TikTok at Stress Relief HQ.
Awesome, awesome. Um, I I don't know how to end this conversation because I feel like after the end of this recording, we're gonna still unwind and we're gonna talk a lot more. But I want to say thank you for spending some time here in the Rajiv Show. Thank you so much for dropping by. And as I mentioned earlier, I hope you drop by in upcoming seasons whenever I decide to make another season. Thank you so much for being a part of the Rajiv Show, pal. I'm a huge supporter. I want to send my love and my love to you and your program and everything that you're doing. I mean, everything is gold in what you do, and more power to you, pal.
I appreciate you for having me, and I appreciate what you're doing. You're making a difference in the world too. I appreciate that very much, brother.
So, folks, for those who are tuning in, I hope you picked up a lot in this conversation. And like I said, it's been a blast doing these types of conversations. And of course, we're still near our goal mark. I'm not gonna unveil the goal mark yet, but I'm grateful for those who have been tuning in, supporting the Rajiv Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And with that in mind, cheers, folks. I will see you in the next episode.